The Last Whisper. Chapter 1. The Whispering Walls. I stepped into the musty darkness, my eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light filtering through the grimy windows of the old house. The air was thick with an eerie silence, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The once grand Victorian had seen better days. Now it stood like a relic of a bygone era, worn and weary from years of neglect. But I needed this place, desperate for solitude after the accident that left me scarred and isolated. The move had been sudden, a decision born out of desperation rather than choice. My heart still raced with the memory of that fateful night. Flames engulfed my car as it careened through the intersection like a pyre, skin seared from face to chest in a grotesque dance of twisted metal and burning rubber. The scorch marks marred my arms now, an unwanted reminder of survival. No one knew about those who perished alongside me. They were never found. My mind harbored guilt's heavy weight. In the quiet hours of night, I often heard voices, whispers that echoed in the darkness. Whispers I'd learned to ignore as merely a product of my tormented subconscious. Guilt and grief manifesting in ethereal murmurs. Yet since moving into this decrepit abode, they've become insistent. At first, I dismissed it as the house settling, old wooden beams shifting with age. But as nights passed, unmistakable shapes darted within my periphery, shadowy figures skirting corners of vision. The air seemed charged with an unnatural energy, and in those moments, I believed I heard names on lips beyond my own. Emily, David. It was a trick of the mind, a cruel trickster playing out a twisted game. On the first night, I lay in bed as the house shuddered and groaned. I clung to my blanket, pulse racing with every creak and moan. Outside, leaves rustled in an unnatural breeze that carried whispers like autumn leaves caught on the wind. Emily and David. Names echoing through my dreams since that fateful night, but now reverberated in reality. In the darkness, the shadows seemed alive, their movements a sinuous dance of elongated fingers, ethereal forms playing at the edges of vision. Determined to prove it was just the old house settling, I ventured out into the moonlit backyard. Shadows moved on the fringes. As I approached, they vanished. The night air felt heavy with an unseen presence, malevolent, like watching eyes upon my skin. Suddenly, a gust swept through, carrying on its breath more than leaves. A name. David. My heart skipped a beat. Another whispered, muffled and distant. Emily. My imagination painted them as specters of the damned. Yet in that moment, I felt an overwhelming dread, paralyzing. I returned to the safety of my room, sheets soaked with sweat. In the morning light, the shadows remained still, silent sentinels guarding their secrets. A house had no voice, only the wind or the imagination playing tricks. Yet the whispers persisted, a steady hum in the background as I navigated rooms that seemed to breathe and pulse around me. In a haze of exhaustion, I drifted off to sleep. The dreams came, vivid and twisted, faces of those who died with me on that fateful night. They spoke in hushed tones about the living, their lives before death, their deepest fears and desires, a macabre litany of what they'd not dared confess while alive. Emily's voice was a gentle songbird's melody. David's a baritone bass that vibrated through my chest. I woke with a start, drenched in sweat, to find the room hushed as before dawn. They were not here, the shadows, only me, lost in nightmares. Each night brought more defined visions and more frequent apparitions of specters at the edge of perception. I began to question sanity. It's just a house, a relic of the past, holding secrets it wanted forgotten. But when David spoke aloud, a raspy voice carrying on the wind, "Run," I knew I couldn't ignore the whispers anymore. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The dreams intensified, tormenting me with scenes from lives that ended before they began. David's heart raced as he faced his oppressors. Emily screamed until there was no breath left. Nightmarish visions of the accident haunted my slumber. David's pleading eyes staring out of shattered glass, and Emily's silent wails in a car full of smoke and flames. Their faces, etched into memory, became specters that followed me through waking life now. Their stories inscribed on walls. Mrs. Jenkins, my elderly neighbor, watched me from across the street with an unwavering gaze, a keen observer. One evening, she knocked as I returned from the grocery store, her wrinkled hands clutching a small plate of fresh baked goods. A gesture meant to be kind, but felt like an interrogation. We exchanged pleasantries, and I sensed a hint of unease beneath her smile. The whispers grew louder with each day, David's voice a haunting melody accompanying my footsteps through the halls. The past loomed large as the present. It was no longer just my mind playing tricks. A cold sweat drenched my skin at nightfall when the whispers intensified, drawing closer. In those shadowy corners, shadows coalesced into forms, a woman and man with skin blackened by fire. Emily's eyes were the first to find me as I lay in bed, those haunting orbs piercing through the darkness. David's face materialized behind her, twisted in a scream that echoed my own nightmares. They spoke of past traumas, their tormented souls seeking justice for premature departures. One evening, Mrs. Jenkins appeared on my doorstep, her hands clasped together tightly. "Strange happenings at night? Odd noises?" she asked. When I admitted the shadows and whispers, a sorrowful expression marred her face, lines etched by age deepening into crevices of concern. Her words tumbled out in hushed tones. "Those who died here, they linger." Her eyes held secrets as if they knew my deepest fears. A flashback seized me during sleep, the night of the accident, itself a nightmare come to life. Flames engulfed us, scorched flesh and screams that became one with the roar of thunderous engines. In this moment, I felt them near, cold breaths on the back of my neck as I lay awake. Emily's ethereal form hovered beside me, while David whispered a single word, my name. The connection between the specters and these whispers strengthened. It wasn't just an old house. It was their story, their unresolved lives woven into every corner, every beam. Mrs. Jenkins visited daily now, sharing stories of those who died in this very abode. A family's tragic end, a young girl lost to illness, and lovers torn from life by war's cruel hand. Each tale wove more threads into the fabric of my reality. Each whispered name more real than the last. Emily's form lingered near as I slept again, David watching with eyes I wished never opened. The whispers had become an unrelenting chorus, a maddening litany of regret and pain. Chapter 3. The Final Revelation. Mrs. Jenkins handed me a tattered photograph before leaving that day, black dot, and white pictures of a family consumed by tragedy amidst the war years. The man in the photo bore a scarred face, familiar, but I couldn't place where from. My gaze lingered on their haunted faces as she departed. In sleep, they found me once more, a nightmare that bled into waking when David spoke with a voice like ash. "Run," he repeated. A car door shattered glass. Flames erupted, and screams joined thunderous engines. My life reflected back to the night of their deaths in every detail. Their rage and regret. I packed light as they called out, whispers merging into one plea, theirs and mine for peace. In a haze of confusion, I fled, leaving my door open, a doorway to what had long been locked within these walls. Mrs. Jenkins found me at the edge of town, a woman from that night's photograph on her lap. "You've set them free." They'd spoken through me as I drove away, David's final words echoing in that car. "Run." In a ball of flame, we sped into darkness, the faces of those who died screaming silently until there was no more breath left, a shared fate of smoke and fire. The old house held their story, there's not mine. As I looked up from Mrs. Jenkins' lap, the flames engulfed us once more. My eyes closed amidst the roar as our past lives were incinerated. They found peace. I awoke in that car, skin burning to ash, yet alive. Emily's face appeared on my lap, her song an elegy sung by those left behind. Their voices one with mine, a haunting harmony of regret and loss, free at last. They came from this house, but they were never really here, only echoes of what had been buried, waiting. In the end, I realized it was just a car. We took their stories to the grave that night, and now they could rest. The wind whispered one final time, "Free." A single flame flickered outside, ashes falling, drifting away like embers of regret. It ended when it began, the cycle broken. Mrs. Jenkins smiled, a knowing smile, and vanished in smoke as they found peace on that fateful night. I left my past behind. In the silence that followed, a breeze rustled leaves. It was just the wind. No, their songs, echoes never silenced.